Here for another live episode of A Cup of Joe, live every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So thank you for tuning in. Last week we talked about navigating multiple offer situations from the buyer side, the seller side, and even the agent side. And what we talked about was from ducks in a row whenever you are looking to purchase a home, to make sure when you do find that right home, you're ready to pull the trigger on it. So an important part of that is understanding and being comfortable with the home buying process. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the home buying process. And there's a lot that goes into it. So feel free to stop me, ask me any questions at any time, and we will be sure to get your questions answered. So I can't see that you're watching, but I can see your comments. So let me know that you're here this morning, tuning in, comment that you're here watching, and I'll answer any questions that you have. So again, the home buying process, let's dive in. So the first thing you're going to want to do whenever you're looking to purchase a home is find an agent that you trust to get the job done for finding the right home at the right price for you and your family. A lot of people and a lot of agents might recommend getting pre-approved for a mortgage before even speaking with an agent. You can do it either way, really. There's no right or wrong way in that. My recommendation, the way that I prefer, is to talk with your realtor and find your realtor before you reach out to a mortgage lender. And the reason being is because most realtors will have a group of mortgage lenders, preferred mortgage lenders, that they work directly with, that they know and trust. And I know how they work, they know how I work, and that can ultimately make the process go a lot more smooth. So either way, find an agent or find a mortgage lender first. But either way, the pre-approval process should be done up front. So the pre-approval process for a mortgage is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's going to determine if you can even qualify to buy a home. It's important to know that up front so we're not wasting any of your time, any of the agent's times. We're all here to help each other. So pre-approval should be done up front. It's going to allow you to know if you can qualify or not. But also number two, it's going to allow you to know how much you can qualify for. You might only think you can qualify for $300,000, but you can end up qualifying for $500,000. But on the other side, you may qualify for $500,000, but you don't want a payment on a $500,000 house. You want a $300,000 payment on a house of that price point. So it's going to allow a mortgage lender is going to be able to walk through different payment scenarios with you to determine what price range you ultimately want and need to be in. A pre-approval is also going to determine, depending on what loan type you can qualify for, what kind of house you can buy, and also sometimes where it can be located at. So always important to get the pre-approval done up front to make sure we're not wasting any time looking at any houses that just don't make sense for you. So after the pre-approval process is done, that's when the fun part begins. That's when we can start looking at houses because we know what you're looking for in a home. So what we're going to do is what I would recommend is talking with your realtor, if you haven't already, to determine what your wants are and what your needs are in a house. And what I tell all of my clients is our goal is to check every single box of what you're looking for in a home. But the reality is, and this is the reality, is we're probably not going to be able to check every single box of what you're looking for in a home. But we want the boxes that don't get checked to be items that you can change about a house. Things like paint color or countertops, things like that. The boxes that we want to make sure 100% get checked are going to be items that you can't change about a house, which is going to be location, maybe the lot, floor plan, things like that you really can't change about a house. So we want to make sure those items, we definitely make sure we check those boxes for you. But we begin the home buying process. We start looking at homes. Sometimes we look at a handful of houses. Other times we look at more houses. But either way, once you find a house that you're comfortable with moving forward on, that's when the offer process begins. So what you'll do is you'll get with your agent, and your agent, whether it be me or anybody else that you're working with, is going to help you with constructing a strong offer that is in your best interest by looking at comparable homes, looking at what those comparable homes sold for, and also how competitive that house is. Our job is to get you the house for the best possible price. So we are going to give you our recommendations. Now, once you present that offer to the seller, there's 3 different things that can happen and that the seller can do with your offer. Number 1, they can accept your offer, which is excellent. You love to see it. Number 2, they decline your offer together. That's a thumbs down. Number 3 is they counteroffer. I would say counteroffer is what happens the majority of the time. And this can go back and forth several times before all parties, meaning buyer, seller, agree on something. Now, once they accept your offer and all parties have signed off on it, that's what's called a binding agreement. All parties are in agreement of this legal contract, okay? So once you go under contract and you have a binding agreement, you'll put down what's called earnest money. Earnest money is also called good faith money, just shows that you're sincere with your offer, essentially put some skin in the game for you. So earnest money is typically 1% of the purchase price. So if we're talking about a $400,000 house, typically about $4,000. Can be a little bit more depending on, and sometimes even a little bit less, but it can be a little bit more if it's a multiple offer situation or if the house is a little bit more competitive than, just a standard nobody competing against you. So it's with earnest money, it's not like you're just throwing this money out the window. This earnest money will eventually go towards your down payment at the time of closing, but you put it down up front at the time of contract to show the seller that you're sincere with your offer. And in the event that you default on the contract, the seller is liable to keep this earnest money. Okay? So again, that's typically about 1% of the purchase price due at the time of contract. But don't worry, I know you guys are thinking, well, at this point, I haven't even gotten a home inspection. I'm not totally sure if I want to buy the house at this point. So that's why we have what's called a due diligence period. Most times when you go under contract, you'll have what's called a due diligence period. And this is your time to do your due diligence on the house. So this is your time to get your home inspection, get any inspections you want to get on the house, whether it be sewer, septic, termite, any of these kind of inspections you might want to get done. You can also get any contractor quotes you would like to get done. Now, this period that we call a due diligence period, it typically lasts about 10 days. Sometimes it can be shorter. We've seen a lot of shorter due diligence periods now since we're in more competitive situations a lot of times. But typically about a week to 10 days is what we're seeing. You can back out anytime during this due diligence period for any reason and get your earnest money back. So let's just say the inspection goes bad. We can't get the seller to agree to do some of the repairs that we want to get them to do. You can back out, get your money back. Or let's just say you find a house that you like better, or you don't want to buy a house at all anymore. You're not comfortable with it. You can back out anytime during this period, get your money back, and no questions asked. So that's something to keep in mind. There's a couple things that I recommend when after the home inspection. You can either negotiate for the seller to do some of the repairs, or you can even negotiate for them to give you a monetary value towards the repairs. It can go either way. Every situation is different. So you're going to want to get with your agent, and they're going to be able to best help you work through those situations in your best interest. So we've talked through the offer process. We've talked through what the due diligence period and what the inspection period is. You'll also have what's called a financing contingency. So a financing contingency is essentially a safety net on your financing, which is great to have. So a financing contingency typically lasts a couple of weeks, most times about 21 days. You're seeing a lot of shortened financing contingencies right now in competitive offer situations. So essentially what that is let's just say you get through your due diligence period, but you're still within your financing contingency and your financing goes south. The mortgage lender calls you and says, hey, Joe, I'm sorry, you can't qualify for this mortgage. We can't give you this loan. That's totally okay. Yes, you are outside of your due diligence period, but if we can get that mortgage lender to provide you a loan denial letter, you can get out of the contract and get your earnest money back. Of course, you're going to be out your home inspection money, but you're going to be able to get your couple $1,000s in earnest money back, which is a huge help. So one thing I will say is this doesn't happen too often, especially with the mortgage lenders that I work with directly. So they all do a great job of making sure you are a qualified buyer up front to prevent us from wasting any time, because we don't want to spend all your weekends and all your time going and looking at homes if you can't ultimately even qualify for a house. So I make sure my mortgage lenders do a great job up front, making sure they're well qualified to prevent any issues like this from happening. Now, there are some things that could make this happen. So you don't want to go and open any new lines of credit after you already go under contract. You see people sometimes go out and start financing furniture for their house that they don't even own yet, and they're putting it on credit. You don't want to do things like that. You don't want to go and open a new credit card. You don't want to go and finance a new car. Any of those items are big no-nos during the home buying process that can ultimately affect whether you can qualify for a home or not. So it's best to just sit tight until you close on your house, or consult your mortgage lender beforehand to make sure that it's okay that you move forward on something like that. So that's what's called your financing contingency, a safety net on your financing. Number 2 is going to be an appraisal contingency. So much like the financing contingency, the appraisal contingency is going to be a safety net on the appraisal. So of course, when you're financing a home, the mortgage lender has to get an appraisal done on the property to compare the sales price to the appraised value of the home, because they're not going to loan you more money than what the home is worth. So when they get the appraisal done, in the event that it comes in low, as long as you're within your appraisal contingency, and the seller does not agree to reduce the price to the appraised value, you can still get out of the contract and get your earnest money back. But if the appraisal comes in low outside of your financing contingency and the seller does not agree to reduce the purchase price, you have 2 options. Number 1, walk away and lose your earnest money. And number 2, make up the difference between the appraised value and the sales price and cash, which can sometimes be a substantial amount. So it's my job as your agent to work directly with the lender and you to make sure we're getting everything done in a timely manner. The financing process and the appraisal process can be two of the more time-consuming things in the home buying process. So it's important to get the lender any documents that they may be requesting in a timely manner, because that's what ultimately takes the home buying process so long, or the closing process of so long. Typically takes about 30 days to close on a home, mostly due to the financing. If it's a cash sale, you can close in a matter of days. So make sure you're getting any documents to the lender in a timely manner to make sure we're meeting all contingency deadlines to ultimately keep your best interest in mind. So that's how the financing and appraisal process works. Now, after that's done, we hope that things are smooth sailing from there. And oftentimes they are once we work through all these hurdles. The next thing that we would do is what's called a final walkthrough before closing. So this typically happens after the seller moves out. So either the evening or afternoon before closing, or sometimes even the morning of closing, the day of closing. What we'll do is we'll go do a final walkthrough of the house. And what we're doing on this final walkthrough is we're going to make sure that all repairs that the seller agreed to fix have been completed. We also want to make sure that no major damages occurred during the move-out process. So movers didn't put any holes in the wall or something moving out. We also want to make sure that there were no hidden damages by any furniture that may have been in the house that we couldn't see while the house was still being lived in. Sometimes that happens. So that's the whole point of a final walkthrough. Assuming that everything goes well, you go to the closing table, which is at a closing attorney's office. In most cases, you'll see the other party there, so you'll see the seller there. And we like to make it a great experience. I know personally at a lot of our closings, which I prefer to close with McMichael and Gray, they do an excellent job for all of my closings. So they're all over Metro Atlanta, all over Georgia, and really all over the Southeast. They do an excellent job with all of my closings because they really try to create a great customer and client experience. So they serve champagne at all of our closings, of course, as long as the buyer wants that. But we really just try to create a great experience for everybody, and we try to make it a fun time because it is an exciting time. So closing typically takes about an hour. The only thing that you'll need to be doing is you'll wire your funds beforehand, and you'll also want to bring 2 forms of ID. Closing typically takes about an hour. We get you in and out, and then the next thing you know, you're a homeowner. So very exciting process right there. One last thing that I wanted to talk about before I let you guys go is what expenses you guys might have during the home buying process. So of course you're going to have your down payment, and you hear all the time about, okay, it takes 20% to buy a home, 20% down to buy a home. And that's simply not true. If you're a first-time home buyer, you can buy a home for as little as 0% down, no money down, depending on where you're looking to buy. That's more in the rural areas. It's called what's called a USDA loan. And that's really not until you get up to Dawsonville, North Forsyth areas, or some of the surrounding rural areas that you might be able to qualify for that kind of loan. Most cases, you're going to be able to put as little as 3% down towards your home. Of course, if you put down 20%, you don't have to pay any PMI, which is private mortgage insurance, which is typically about $100 a month, depending on what price point you're looking to be in. But once you hit that 20% equity mark in your home, which you can always get refinanced, that PMI will fall off. So some interesting things to think about there. So you're going to have as little as 3% of the purchase price down. So if you're buying a $300,000 house, that's $9,000. But you're also going to have what's called closing costs. So I always tell my clients to estimate closing costs to be about 3% of the purchase price as well. So worst case scenario, with minimum down, you'd be looking about 6% of the purchase price down. But the great thing about closing costs is they're negotiable with the seller. So let's just say the house is listed for $300,000. You can present the seller an offer of $300,000. Oh, but I want you to pay $5,000 towards my closing costs. So that can save you a lot of money out of pocket, with also allowing it's not going to have a huge effect on your mortgage payment. The difference of $295,000 and $300,000 in a mortgage payment is not going to be very much, but it can save you several $1,000s out of pocket. So something to keep in mind there. Closing costs are going to be all of your lender fees, attorney fees, and your prepaid items such as your homeowners association, your homeowners insurance, property taxes, all those type of things. The great thing about being a buyer is you don't have to pay a buyer's agent any commission. The seller is responsible for paying both sides agent commissions in many cases, and the seller is responsible for paying both sides commission, both the listing agent commission and the buyer's agent commission, and the buyer is responsible for paying the closing costs. But again, we just talked about that they're negotiable with the seller. It all just depends on what you can work out during the offer process. So that's all I have for today. I appreciate all you guys tuning in. I said we had a couple people commenting. So yes, Heather, I can get you a Cup of Joe morning mug. I will make sure to do that. I was actually in your guys' neighborhood the other day. Try to give you guys a call. I got blown off, but that's okay. I'll stop by sometime soon. I'll actually be there again this week, and maybe I can drop you off a coffee mug. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you do want a coffee mug, a Cup of Joe, my smiling face on one side, and then our team logo, Go With Joe & Co. on the other side, let me know. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Even if you're watching replay, let me know that you watched. Let me know if you found it any good information out of it. Also, let me know if there's any other topics you guys would like me to talk about. And I will see you guys next week, 8 a.m., Wednesday morning, for another Cup of Joe.